Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode review and breakdown for Stargirl Season 2. Today we're talking about Episode 7, aka Summer School, Chapter 7. Another solid episode of Stargirl Season 2, of course, following up after last week's banger of an episode. Last week's episode was such a masterpiece and really brutal by the end, but it was such a good episode. So obviously, this was tough to follow. Not as good of an episode as last week, but again, that was hard to top. But still, a good episode. Really enjoyed it, and it really put a focus on Yolanda specifically, because when we start off this episode, she's continuing her story that we saw set up at the end of Season 1, where she murdered Brainwave, and now as we've seen throughout the season so far, she's just been getting these almost like mini panic attacks and just these migraines and just weird apparitions, and you keep hearing the brainwave sound and everything. So that's what's really explored in this episode, and I really like the way that they did it. Yvette Monreal, who plays Yolanda, did such an amazing job here. But anyways, spoiler warning if you've not yet seen this episode, because we are going in depth with it. But without further ado, let's jump in and talk about Stargirl Season 2, Episode 7. So when we start off the episode, Yolanda has gone back to the church for another confessional, and we saw her do this in, I think it was the first episode, but the big difference here is when she did that in the first episode, the pastor asked her, do you want to talk or do you want to just sit? And she said she just wanted to sit. So it seems like she's been going back there multiple times, but she was never ready to talk. Until now, because this time she does talk, and she starts talking about the devil, and is the devil real? And if he is, then we need to kill him. And it's she's getting into some real dark stuff here, and she's having more flashbacks to killing Brainwave and Henry and that whole experience. So that's going on there. Meanwhile, it is July 3rd, so the whole town of Blue Valley is getting ready for their celebrations for the 4th of July. Very American and patriotic here. But the big thing here that I want to talk about is what's going on at the American Dream with Barbara, because you've got some cool stuff going on there. Seems like she's taken more so of a leader position on the board, which, good for her. But towards the end of this scene, she sees something on the ceiling. It's like this shadow, almost like if there was a leak in your ceiling and it would get all moist up there. Well, that's what's happening here, and then it starts dripping down. But it's almost more like blood. So this is what I'm assuming is the Shade, because we saw that the Shade was brutally beat down by Eclipso last episode, and he's still alive, but it seems like he's not in control of his powers, or something's wrong with him. He's just not in great working condition at this moment, so I have a feeling that maybe he's trying to send a signal to her, but we didn't get anything else on that in this episode, but I'm definitely excited to see where that goes in the future. But then Yolanda, getting back to Yolanda, she's struggling at work too. So you've got Maria, her boss that we saw. She's kind of been the main waitress here. So she's helping her out, but she gets corrupted by Eclipso in this scene and pours hot coffee all over this angry customer, which, he kind of deserved it for acting like that. But meanwhile, this is where we see Yolanda actually meet Bruce Gordon, who of course is the little boy that Eclipso took on the form of at the end of last week's episode. But was also featured in the first episode. Remember that flashback with the death of Dr. McNider's daughter. So yeah, we've got Bruce Gordon here. He has an interaction with Yolanda. She gives him a cool little lollipop, so good for him. Love me some lollipops. But yeah, he's just being super creepy here. I loved his fully elf form, that he just dark elf creepy form that he had at the end of last episode, but I don't know what's creepier, that form or his child form, because just that child laugh is so disturbing, but it's so effective at the same time. So yeah, there's that going on there. Meanwhile, Courtney's meeting up and talking with Cameron again, so nice to get some more teases of that. But we gotta talk about Mike, because Mike in this episode is really interesting, because again, some other stuff going on here, doesn't really play a huge role. It's just really a few couple scenes here, but they're really important scenes, because you see that he is now starting to do some training with the JSA, even though it's not really that much and he's not really what he expected it to be. But he's working with Pat, trying to fix up Stripe and do all that stuff. But while Pat goes off to look at something else, I think he went to go talk to Zeke, Mike sees the shards of the black diamond sitting there on the table, and I completely forgot about this, but yeah, they got the shards of the black diamond. I was surprised they just left them lying around there, but yeah, it's on the table. He picks it up, and of course, he doesn't get corrupted, but he starts seeing things. He starts seeing these leeches on his hands and all over his body. He starts freaking out. Pat comes back in, of course, saves him, and of course he's like, you shouldn't be touching that and never pick that up ever again. But he also mentions that this black diamond is the only known weakness of Eclipso. So that's what they used to defeat him the first time. So hopefully they'll be able to use it to defeat Eclipso once again, because of course that's what was containing him before Cindy unleashed him at the end of season 1 when she got out the black diamond from the storage. So that's definitely some foreshadowing to seeing how things are going to go there. But meanwhile, Yolanda goes back to the church, but this time her mother's there because, again, at the beginning of the episode, during that confessional with the pastor, she was talking about the devil and like killing him and all this stuff. So obviously he was a bit concerned. So he called in her mother. I completely hate her mother. I hate her whole family. Like, her family is just so rude and disrespectful. Like, I get it. Like, it's probably like based off how they were brought up and like their beliefs and everything. But like, that's kind of just wrong. Like, you gotta forgive your kid after a while. I mean, it's been months, probably over a year at this point since the whole photo disaster. But yeah, I mean, automatically in the scene, she's just jumping in like, oh, you shouldn't be bringing your problems into the church. And it's like, calm down, lady. And even the pastor says that, like, she doesn't need more judgment. She needs more love and comfort in this situation. So, but then Yolanda looks off in the distance and she sees Brainwave walk out the door. So she just rushes off because she thinks she sees Brainwave. So she freaks out, but then he's not there. So then the next day at school, a very similar thing happens. She's in the middle of class, and then all of a sudden she sees Henry King Jr., which, by the way, it was just so cool to see these actors come back and see these characters return, even though like they're still dead, but like just to see them back in action, like doing new stuff here. And when we see Henry, his throat is slit, very similar to, of course, how Yolanda slit his throat, even though it was actually Brainwave, at the end of season 1. Because that's the big thing in the scene, is that Brainwave is trying to say that basically Henry's death is all Yolanda's fault, and he's just like making her feel so bad for this. But again, I love the interactions here between Yolanda and Brainwave, and then she wakes up and Courtney's like, oh, what is going on here? Like, what happened? So they decide that they need to go and tell the JSA the truth, because they just told them previously that, like, oh yeah, Brainwave just died when the ISA headquarters collapsed in on itself and all that stuff, but that's not what actually happened. So they tell them that, yeah, Yolanda killed Brainwave, and obviously this is a big deal and it's a big reveal here, but I love the interaction here between Yolanda and Rick, how Rick doesn't even like freak out that much, and he tries to defend her, but then like she counterattacks with like, then why didn't you kill Solomon Grundy? And he's like, oh, my hour was up. But we know that his hour was not up. He let Solomon Grundy live because he couldn't do it. He couldn't kill Grundy, but Yolanda was willing to cross that line. So then after this, she goes back to the church once again, and she sees Brainwave again. So we get this really cool battle between Yolanda and Brainwave, and it was really interesting because in this scene, he's saying that as he was dying, he transferred his mind and his consciousness into her body. So he's basically saying that, like, he's alive and, like, trapped in her body, and that's how this has been happening this whole time. And I'm not completely sure what to believe here, because that could be the case, but then again, we don't know for sure. It doesn't really matter though, because after Courtney shows up as Stargirl and like, Brainwave gets her and everything, Wildcat just kills Brainwave once again, but instead of, it's kind of a reflection of what happened at the end of season 1, where it was Brainwave disguised as Henry. So it was like Yolanda killing Henry, and then it morphed back into the true form of Brainwave. This time it's the opposite, where she killed Brainwave, but then it morphed back into Henry. So in this case, she actually did kill Henry, even though it was just, pretty much all in her head here in this situation. and he's like, oh, you're gonna burn with me, and he literally like goes up in flames and like is actually burning here, and that was just like such a crazy moment. But Courtney is able to snap her out of it using the cosmic staff, and Yolanda wakes up and she quits. She says, I'm done as Wildcat. I just can't take it anymore. And this was such a crazy moment that I was not expecting, because obviously I knew this was going to have a big impact on her, but I didn't know it was going to be to this extent. I had no idea she was going to quit the team. Now, obviously, I think most likely there's like a 99% chance that she's going to come back to the team and return as Wildcat at some point, but I guess she's leaving the team for now. She even quit her job and everything, and wow, like it's just crazy. Like and then it almost seems like she's putting the blame on Courtney for like, you're the reason I got into this in the first place. You chose me to be Wildcat. I never should have been Wildcat. And then she tries to call her, and her mom picks up, and her mom is just being super controlling once again, and yeah, just like it's so bad and so crazy here. But Yolanda is one of my favorite characters on the show, so I'm really excited to see where this goes, because it's such an interesting story. And I love Wildcat, so I really, really hope that we get to see her suit up once again, and hopefully towards the end of the season, be able to help take down Eclipso. Hopefully she doesn't actually kill him this time, but then again, who knows, because it seems like she's the only one on the JSA that's actually willing to cross that line and do that. But at the end here, Courtney talks with the family about like what happened, and she's like, sorry I didn't tell you about the truth of Brainwave and all that stuff. And then I love this moment with Mike, because this was something that was brought up a couple episodes ago. I think it was episode 2, or maybe it was episode 3, when after they fought the Shade. Yolanda specifically asked Mike, like, was it an accident when you killed Icicle? And like, yeah, that's reiterated here, that Mike says when he killed Icicle, it was an accident. Like, he was just driving and was like, oh, he's there, and then he hit him, and it was a complete and total accident, which is the complete opposite of what Yolanda did, because she completely did that on purpose. But I love that moment, because, obviously the fact that it was an accident does kind of like bring down like, I don't know exactly how to word it, but like just like the meaning of it was like Icicle was like the big bad main villain of that season, then he just gets taken out on accident. But whatever, it makes sense here with the story and with the characters, so I did really like seeing that. But the ending of this episode was crazy and really creepy, because once again you get to see little Bruce Gordon, who is just sitting outside Beth's house just watching her sleep, and he's got his lollipop, and he's not even sucking on the lollipop. He's like full on biting it. And any kid you see biting a lollipop, call the exorcist. Like, that something is wrong with that kid. So yeah, that's gonna be pretty crazy to see where this goes here. But guys, that was the episode, Stargirl season 2 episode 7. Again, another great episode. Really enjoyed it. Excited to see where things go next week, because we are getting a full Rick episode, just like how this episode was focused mainly on Wildcat and Yolanda. Next week's episode is all about Rick and Solomon Grundy. I'm super excited to see the return of Solomon Grundy, so super duper excited for next week's episode. But guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think about this week's episode, Stargirl season 2 episode 7? Let me know all your thoughts, theories, and predictions for the rest of the season in the comments below. And thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on everything that goes on in the DC life.